All right, let's get right into this one. This was a transfer saga that had absolutely everything. Months of negotiations, a deal that was basically done, and then a last-gasp, jaw-dropping twist. This is the inside story of how Arsenal, in one wild 24-hour period, snatched one of the Premier League's biggest stars right from the hands of their bitterest rivals.
So to really get why this move sent such a shockwave through the world of football, we've got to start right at the end with the heist itself. Let's break down exactly how it all went down.
4 months, the entire summer, Tottenham were the only team in the race. They made Eberechi Eze their #1 target, the guy they were building their whole project around. The talks were long, they were public, pretty much everyone knew Spurs were all in on him. And they were so close, you could almost taste it. By Wednesday, Spurs had a deal in principle with Crystal Palace. The fee was sorted, about £55 million plus some add-ons. They were convinced he was their player. The announcement was practically being drafted.
But, and there's always a but, isn't there? As The Guardian put it, the one thing Tottenham had been dreading all summer long was right around the corner. You can just feel the tension in that sentence. Spurs knew their rivals were out there, just watching, waiting. So that's the big question, right? How does a deal that took months to build get completely blown up and rerouted across North London in less than a single day? Well, the answer isn't just about money or tactics. It's a story that actually begins 14 years earlier. You see, to really understand how this all ended, we have to rewind. We have to go all the way back to the very beginning of Eberechi Eze's journey, a journey that started and, for a long time, ended at Arsenal. See, for Eze, Arsenal wasn't just some other club. He was a die-hard fan. He got into their academy when he was just 8 years old. His hero? The one and only Thierry Henry. He even wore the long sleeves just like him. His whole identity as a kid, in his own words, was being the guy who plays for Arsenal. And then, at 13 years old, that identity was just ripped away. Arsenal let him go. And that was just the start of this brutal chain of setbacks. Fulham released him, then Reading. Then, after 2 years at Millwall, they released him too. It was just one crushing blow after another. In this quote, man, it just cuts right to the heart of it. This wasn't just a career setback. It was personal. It was painful. He talks about going to his room and just crying for a week. That feeling, that heartbreak, you have to remember that to understand what happens next.
But here's the thing about Eze. That heartbreak, it didn't break him. Not at all. Instead, he used every single one of those rejections as fuel. And he started the long, difficult climb all the way back to the top.
The big turning point, the lifeline, came from Queen's Park Rangers. At QPR, the coaches there finally saw what everyone else had missed. They helped him grow up, they built his confidence back, and they taught him how to take all that raw street football talent and make it work in the pro game. It was huge for him. And then he moved to Crystal Palace, and that's when he just exploded in the Premier League. And you don't have to be a stats genius to see his growth. Just look at the numbers. Every single season, his goal contributions just kept climbing. He wasn't just a flashy player anymore. He was becoming one of the most productive attackers in the entire league.
Which brings us right back to that fateful summer of 2025. By now, Eze is 27, he's an England international, he's right in his prime, and the two giants of North London came knocking. But they had two very, very different ways of going about it.
Okay, so this is where it gets really fascinating. You have two totally different strategies. On one side, you've got Spurs, very businesslike, grinding out negotiations for weeks, focused on the numbers. They were sure they'd get him. But on the other side, you have Arsenal. They were much quieter. They met Eze, made their interest clear, and then just told Crystal Palace, hey, just keep us in the loop. They were playing the long game, waiting for the right moment, because they knew they had an ace up their sleeve, the player's personal history.
And then it happened. The perfect moment arrived. And this is where a saga that dragged on all summer completely flips on its head in just a few hours. The speed of what happens next is it's breathtaking.
So what was the trigger? Well, it was an unlucky injury to Kai Havertz in Arsenal's very first game of the season. That injury made Arsenal's top brass get together and say, okay, we need to make a move, right now. The whole situation had changed. A door had just been kicked wide open.
But this is the moment the entire story hinges on. It's when the player himself takes control. Right when he's on the verge of saying yes to Tottenham, Eze knew he had to make one last call. According to The Athletic, he literally picked up the phone, called Mikel Arteta himself, and asked, is there any chance at all, that a move to Arsenal could happen?
And Arsenal's response? It was like lightning. They called an emergency board meeting. Co-chairman Josh Kroenke happened to be in London, and he gave the green light immediately. Within hours, a deal for nearly £68 million was agreed with Crystal Palace. And that formal offer from Tottenham, the one they'd spent all summer working on, it was just left sitting there, unanswered. It was fast, it was ruthless, and just like that, it was done.
And boom, the deal was done. But this was so much more than just a transfer. For Eze, for his family, this was a homecoming, one that was 14 years in the making.
And if you want to understand what this really meant, this quote from Eze says it all. He said that on the day he got released as a little kid, his mom actually said a prayer that one day this exact thing would happen, that he would go back. For his family, this wasn't just a career move, it was an answered prayer from more than a decade ago.
So yeah, all the headlines screamed heist and hijack, but when you really look at it, the truth is so much deeper. This wasn't a story about one club outmuscling another. It was the story of a player following his heart, all the way back to the club he loved as a boy to finish the story he started.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thought, doesn't it? In this massive, multi-billion-dollar business that we call modern football, a world driven by agents and analytics, the story of Eberechi Eze reminds us that sometimes things like emotion and history can still be the most powerful forces of all. It makes you wonder, just how much is a childhood dream really worth?